Welcome to Data Brew by Databricks with Denny and Brooke. The series allows us to explore various topics in the data and AI community. Whether we're talking about data engineering or data science, we're going to interview subject matter experts to dive deeper into these topics while we're enjoying our morning brew. My name is Denny Lee. I'm a principal developer advocate here at Databricks and one half of Data Brew.
And hello, I'm Brooke Wenig, Director of our Machine Learning practice at Databricks and the other half of Databrew. And today I'm thrilled to introduce Julia Neagu, CEO and co-founder of Quotient AI, and also previously Julia had led the GitHub Copilot data team. So we'd love to learn all about evaluation, AI, Copilot, and Quotient from you today. So welcome, Julia.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So to kick it off, I know many people have heard of GitHub Pilot. Many people are using GitHub Copilot. We're using it internally at Databricks. And would love to learn from you first. Why was it successful, and what did you learn through this process of building GitHub Copilot?
Sure. So working on GitHub Copilot was an interesting experience because I did not join GitHub to work on Copilot. What ended up being the case was I think it was late 2022. There was I think it was around when the like ChatGPT came out and there was more attention starting to come towards LLMs, and it was starting to become more apparent that this experimental project that GitHub Next I worked on internally was going to maybe be bigger than it was meant to be. Um, they gathered pretty much everyone who could possibly work on it from within the company. So that was more of a right person at the right time kind of adventure. But it was, and I ended up working on it for, I think it ended up being like a year and a half before I started Quotient. And coming out of that project, I thought we knew we were ahead, like we knew we were like one of the first AI projects in terms of user reach and scope and also impact. But we didn't we didn't know how far ahead we were, like, because we all work on it. It was we hadn't paid attention to the external world for a while. So I thought we were like 6 months to 1 year ahead in terms of investments that we had made, tooling that we had built, and I think looking back, I think we were like 2 years ahead. And I think the main difference in terms, I think that actually something that really moved the needle were these investments that we had made in like tooling and infrastructure for building Copilot, for testing it, for like running experiments, that actually made it, because we had made this upfront investment in tooling and infrastructure. It allowed us to move very quickly, in terms of like testing different models, testing different prompts, putting into production, having the comfort to put it in front of millions and millions of users, and that was growing every day. So I actually think a lot of the initial success of Copilot was the fact that we didn't just ship based on vibes. We actually There was a lot of thought process structure put into how we were iterating and building and shipping.
So, are you saying that vibe development isn't the new thing? Is that what you're trying to
Uh,
imply?
Actually, my take now is you should 100% do vibes first. That is a very hot take. But maybe at some point look at some statistics.
Oh, okay, fair enough. No, but no, seriously. I love the theme that you're talking about, the building of the infrastructure up front. Obviously it's Copilot, so there's only so much you can share. But I'm just curious: are there any overriding themes or overriding concepts that you can talk about in terms of like what were the infrastructure? I mean, you already talked about a little bit about the idea of like, okay, infrastructure to do testing, infrastructure to run different models. I'm just curious, can you
Yeah.
just go a little bit deeper in that?
Yeah, that's funny because a lot of the paths that we kind of like build internally at the time end up being a lot of the common paths that we see emerging in terms of like infrastructure tooling in the market today. And that's also, for example, like where Quotient is spending a lot of their time. Like we're very focused on figuring out, okay, what is the right tooling to help developers get into the same happy paths that we saw at GitHub Copilot. So for example, like you see these themes around, you want to test before production, like that seems reasonable, right? So,
Maybe, yeah.
yeah, that's you're right. That sounds like a good thing to do, and you want to have comprehensive telemetry once you ship things. But then ideally, if you build these right, you can start connecting things that happen in production with metrics you can measure before production, such that as you're iterating things, kind of like before shipping, you can kind of get a sense, oh, this will actually move the needle in terms of what will work best for our users. So for example, something like that we're working on Copilot was we had a pretty good sense before we shipped anything to production if it was actually going to lead to higher acceptance rates from the user.
Hmm.
And everything was experiment driven, and there was like a team of about 20 people that every other week reviewed all the experiments and decided what to ship just based on the statistics. I think that's definitely like, I don't know, like it's a lot of time and investment. And I don't think all products need that. But I think this idea that like, hey, yeah, like you're like then you like ship before, like test before you ship, measure things in production, ideally like link the two. I think that's very important.
So, like, this key theme of investing in infrastructure and tooling is very loud and clear. 5 minutes in, loud and clear.
Yes.
Just curious how you see it differing for working with Gen AI based solutions that are non deterministic when people are so used to like the processes and working in deterministic systems like software engineering, more traditional machine learning.
Yeah, that's a really good kind of question. I think we're all still figuring it out. Like, I think I know, like we're still early. Like, I know it feels like we've
Hmm.
been in the weeds of it for, I don't know, 2 years at this point. Some people longer. But I think when we're gonna look back, we're gonna say, "Oh, this was like a bit of the wild west of building with AI." And what like think a bit about how this relates to traditional software development. Um, it's interesting because when I spoke to like the teams that end up building with AI, it was almost always traditional software engineers who got I guess similar to my experience on Copilot, like staffed on generative AI products. So we all came with like traditional, I know the traditional tools that we use for building software, the traditional intuitions for building software. And it ended up being the case again, exactly because what you were saying, Brooke, about due to this like non-deterministic nature of working with LMs, that some of those intuitions actually like hindered progress, and like in some cases it led to people like not building the best products they could, or sometimes like shipping things that I know that had really bad behavior in production. So I think there's some again, not that many like really bad stories, but still like a lot of stories where products could have been better. So I think there's two things. One, I think when we're working with these new types of technologies, we just need to update our intuitions. Like, don't expect that because we did n equals one test, that every time we run that test, it's gonna come out the same. Don't expect that you'll have like 100% accuracy with your tests. That's actually probably like more an indication these days that you're not testing enough or your tests. So yeah, I know, right? It's like what's happening. Um and and then it will take a lot of time, but actually, yeah, make the upfront investment to like set up tools that will help you in the long term, uh, to move faster and help you like actually as you're developing, as you're testing, make sure you've tested enough. And you have tools that like kind of like save you from your intuition from traditional software development.
So related to that, because I still remember when I coming from software engineering going into data engineering, it took like a decade, maybe even a decade and a half for us to finally get to a point where we're going, hey, we're starting to bridge the gap between software engineering and data engineering because sort of data engineering in the past was definitely more intuition based, definitely didn't do nearly as much testing as required. Um, and forget about metrics, or even if we had metrics, we didn't understand half of the metrics we were looking at. Um, and so I'm just curious, like, do you think it'll still take us another decade, decade and a half for us to build those processes in for Gen AI? Or do you feel that because people are understanding early on that we do require infrastructure, we do require evaluation of metrics, that maybe we're gonna be maybe this time around we'll be a little bit better about it? What's your take?
That's an interesting question. I generally am not just in this context. I think in life of the opinion that history has a really good track record of repeating itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think things will take time, and I am. I think my concern is that it may take even longer because I think the problem with LLMs is I think people have this expectation it's gonna be magic, right? Like I don't know, like all these models came out, and like the first time we saw it, it looked like magic, right? Like it was like such a big jump from everything we have seen. Like I was still doing like NLP, like I know, like Dark Ages models when like GPT-3 came out, it was like it was magic, right? Like it was kind of like when we all saw the iPhone, I was like, oh my God, like this is like absolutely nuts. Um, but I think that brought with the expectation that like it will keep being magic, even when you go and put like a prompt into your software. Um, that when you build that into your product, it will keep magically working. And I actually think because we had this expectation it will miraculously work without any investment, in some ways we could have spent the last 6 months to a year building tooling such that right now we'd be like ready to go. Instead of kind of like, I feel like we've been kind of like hoping it will magically work without the upfront investment. I think we're just now going back and being like, actually, now I realize it's not magic. It's more like a helpful assistant. And now we actually need to go and like build a really good comprehensive development structure.
So your comment earlier about like if you're getting 100% accuracy, it's probably saying you don't have enough tests. How do you know when you have enough tests? And how much of like the software engineering best practices of like test-driven developments, like writing some of your tests up front, really come into play when thinking about Gen AI applications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know soon I hope we will have some sort of answer for like there's some like I would want, for example, Quotient to be able to tell you, hey, this is your testing coverage. And this
Mm-hmm.
you haven't tested in these areas enough. And that's something we're working on internally. For the time being, I think it goes back to being like it's an iterative process. And my personal metric for have I tested enough is, am I surprised? Like, do I put something in front of a user and they come back a week later and they show me things and I'm surprised? And the magnitude and frequency of surprises correlate with whether you have tested enough.
Surprise meaning bad surprise or even a good surprise?
Could be good surprise, like, but I think if you're likely get good surprises, you're just as likely to get bad surprise. Like, because it goes back to traditional software development, right? Like, if you, it's the same thing. Like, something happens in production and something unexpected happens. You're like, oh, that's weird. Where did that come from? And next time you put a test, and hopefully over time, surprises go down. Um, so that's my personal metric. It's not a quantitative one yet, although I guess I could keep track.
Well, I mean, I think was that they say when it comes to scientific discoveries or engineering discoveries, it's often the most common approach where you know that there's something going on is because like, oh, that's odd, right? Basically, you're going, it's hard to quantify, so it's still very a qualitative metric, and that's probably why it's taking us so long to actually build processes around all this in the first place, right? Just because we still aren't sure what number we're supposed to apply to this thing in the first place.
Yeah, like that's a very good point because something like I talk to people and like users, customers where they're all building these with these types of tools. And one of the questions that I ask, like they ask pretty early in the conversation when people come to me like, oh, I want to be able to like develop like an evaluation framework, a testing framework to test this product. And I asked them, so I understand that, so you're the expert in your use case. I can sort of understand based on a two sentence description you gave me, but I'm going to ask you, you as the expert in your product, can you look at it? Can you look at the output coming from them and you know if it's good or bad? Like, can you tell? And actually, that's a very that's really good at showing one of they actually sometimes even if it's like if it's testable, like of the like is the goodness of the response something that's testable? Because half of the times people are like, I don't know. And I'm like, if you don't know, I can't help you. Like you need to know if you said, at least then like I look at it and I can tell. But I think yeah, half of the time the answer is yes, half the time the answer is no. But I actually think the developer or someone who can has access to a system needs to be able to say this is good or this is bad. Otherwise, you can't develop tests for it.
So, speaking of evaluations and testing, I had watched your Data and AI Summit talk leading up to this podcast. And you mentioned 5 rules of evaluations to bring a product to production, being realistic, aligned, comprehensive, reproducible, and secret. Can you walk us through what those mean?
Sure. I need to. So let's go to to the first one. So the first one was realistic, I think. So realistic. And just to provide some context, I like similar like through similar conversations with people building in the space. They would ask me, okay, how do I know? Um, like what are good evaluations? Like why are my evaluations not comprehensive? Why do I feel I'm not getting as much out of them? So I spent some time basically like writing down, hey, what are like happy paths to work for traditional software development, and what would what would be like core principles that we would need to replicate for like building with LLMs in this again non-deterministic process. So the first one I think was realistic. So basically you will have a better like the quality of your tests will be better the closer they are to the real world scenarios that your users are going to put your product through. The further they are, the less useful they are. And it's fine to like start off with some theoretical examples where you like, I don't know, count number of words and things like that. But the closer you can either like exactly measures what the users will want in production, like let's say if they expected it in a particular format or something like that, um or find proxies for things that a user will want, like let's say number of words would be like a proxy for like its verbosity, and users expect things not to be verbose. The closer you can align your system, your evaluations to what the users how the users kind of like intuitively evaluate, the better. I remember the last one. I think the last one is secret. That's in response to there's a lot of, especially in the AI community, there's a lot of talk about like benchmarks, and whenever a new model comes out, it gets benchmarked on the same set of benchmarks. That can be somewhat gamified and can lead to like you don't get useful tests. And then um the best thing you can do actually is like if you have an evaluation data set, keep it secret, and even better, keep it secret from yourself. It's similar from traditional machine learning where like yeah, don't look on the test set and don't train on the test set despite what other people would say. And you're going to be better served by keeping an evaluation data set privately and then testing things versus yeah, like allowing, I don't know, putting it in the open domain and having people train on it. I think if you do put it, that's great, but then you should have an expectation that it'll not be like people can actually like add those test data sets as part of their training data sets.
Yeah,
uh,
just data leakage all over again.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, like everything. Yeah, it's an old problem with a new name.
Right. So that's interesting because there seems to be an implication, like, because we're one of the topics that I definitely want to dive into is like how enterprises can better harness their internal data. That it seems to imply that then one of the things enterprises should do is actually build this quote unquote secret data set, this data set that actually is not leaked because then allows them to actually truly evaluate
Yeah.
the models that they're creating, generating, fine tuning, whatever else.
Yeah, and actually, this is another example of it's an old problem with a new name because similar to, I know, like remember big data, like that was a thing several years ago. Uh, like it was the same thing, right?
Thanks for
Hey,
making me spit my coffee, but yeah, sorry.
but yeah, right, like it was the same conversation of hey, like if I could record this pitch and you wouldn't know what I'm talking about if I'm talking about like the world 10 years ago, the world today, but it was the pitch was like, oh, enterprises are have all this data that needs to be curated, it needs to be clean so they it can be useful, so you can do at analytics, LLMs, whatever you want on top of them. Like it's the same story. And I actually think that the next big leap in like capabilities of all everything we're doing in AI today is gonna come from actually harnessing the internal data that enterprises have. Like we're already seeing so many conversations about we're hitting a wall with LM models. We may be or we may not be, but let's say there's some truth there. Or like there everyone's kinda like trying to figure out where to get more data for working with AI because we're bottlenecking on public data sources. um, and you have all this internal data enterprises have, and they're trying right now to like leverage it for like RAG or fine tuning or different things. I think having getting that getting like being able to like a very very effectively harness that internal knowledge that's in all these internal databases is gonna be huge because that's one data no one has. That's gonna allow you to have like a competitive advantage as an enterprise, and you're gonna be able to not just take like GPT-4 off the shelf. You're gonna be able to say, here's like I know, like company X enterprise AI that's like works real, really good because I have real, really good enterprise level data that the I know AI agents or whatever I end up building can access very easily. I actually think that's like the next frontier that we need to unlock.
So before jumping into that, I wanted to go back to what you're talking about with like hitting a wall with AI models.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your forecasts in this space, and where exactly you see this limit being.
I think it's interesting because there's definitely a lot of conversation happening around this. Like I was at a conference recently where there was like the CEO of Databricks was here talking about it, and the CEO of Scale AI was talking about it. Like everyone was talking about it. And I think there's definitely it's definitely interesting enough to have a conversation about it. Like it's not completely absurd that the next kind of like jump in like in quality coming from these models may take some time. And I think it's for some of these reasons we were highlighting today, where maybe like the architecture is bottleneck, maybe like the available data is bottlenecked, who knows. Um, and I think actually that may work to our advantage because then now we can maybe take a step back and like invest in again these like tooling and processes that will help us um kind of like work around the expectation that maybe there won't be like GPT-5 coming out very soon. Or if it does, maybe it won't be like 6 months before AGI or whatever some people have been saying. So yeah, I think the best people to answer whether there is a wall are the people training these models. Like I don't have direct like everything's very much kept under wraps and realistically no one's gonna release that. But I think there's enough conversation, and some people have expressed things even publicly to basically say not necessarily that there's a wall, but maybe like we're like in molasses or something. Maybe like things would just take longer.
Got it. Okay, that's really interesting. And so basically, you're not predicting AGI in the next 6 months, then. So no,
It I know
I'm teasing. I'm
you
joking.
know I'm a founder in AI. I don't wanna get into the when is AGI come. I saw the AGI prediction timeline and I'm
Uh huh.
like every I know major CEOs were predicting when it's gonna come out. I think that's a bit amusing.
All good. No, I'm only joking. Not to mention, considering this is a podcast, you you could be people could be listening to this a couple of years later, and they're going, "Man, did everybody get it all off?" So like, yeah, yeah,
It's always hindsight 2020. Like I know you
yeah. Of
listen
course.
to
Yeah.
like 19th centuries conversations about when we're gonna get to the moon, and it's like 2050 or so. Like it's I know timelines are funny.
Absolutely. So, okay, now going back to actually, so we talked about the 5 rules of evaluation, 5 rules of evaluation. There we go. Sorry, to bring product to production. And we talked a little bit about realistic. We talked a little, very much on realistic. We talked a lot about secrets as well because that was fun. But the other 3 things is aligned, comprehensive, reproducible. So I'm just curious, like, when you saying aligned, I'm curious what's the context for being the aligned evaluation when you're again talking about getting a product to production when it comes to Gen AI?
Yeah, I think it's related to what I was saying before, where like whether how much you're surprised based on what's happening. And I think
Oh,
it's led
fair
to
enough.
yeah, I think it's related to how much does it match your expectations? Like if for example, if I let's say if I test two different models and I use my evaluation suite, but I also use like chatbot arena or something where I show it to the different people, or I just look at it myself, will the numbers that come from my evaluation suite, at least in terms of stack ranking, match kind of like what I can confirm visually or what my users can confirm themselves? Or will I be surprised? Because ultimately, unless you look at a number and you agree with it, or you look at a stack ranking and you agree with it, you're not going to trust the evaluation suite. The main point of having evaluation suite is to scale your intuition and your ability to review things manually. That's why I also think like the first step in evaluation is to look at things manually, and that's where the vibes come in. Like that's actually the first step, and then the comprehensive stuff is how you scale your own intuition. Um, yeah.
Got it. So basically, my insistence on what I call the bagel test, which is basically when I ask the question New
Yes.
York versus Montreal bagels, there I can't really scale that. You're basically saying.
Or yes, you cannot scale that. I know the Mosaic folks also have the cookie recipe test for
Correct. Yeah.
models. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not that's well, it depends on how many cookies you can eat.
It's true, it's true. But by the same token, I think the only reason I bring up the bagel test because for everybody that's listening, a lot of the Mosaic folks are based in New York, and I'm from Montreal, so I'd like to go ahead and constantly berate them on how Montreal bagels are better than New York bagels. So for now, all the Mosaic people, of course, are hating me for that particular thing. And so again, that's a horrible example of how to not scale when you're fighting against the very people that actually understand the stuff better than you do. So, but I digress completely. So.
So when you're talking about scaling out these evaluations, I'm curious, like, who's creating them? Like, are these humans that are doing the vibe trips, writing the evaluations? Are they using LLMs to generate them? Like, just curious how you really scale out that evaluation process.
Sure. So folks do a bunch of different things. I think there are some commonalities around the types of strategies people take when they try to develop new evaluations. Some there's definitely some people use evaluations off the shelves, like heuristic based metrics. Like for example, again, off top of my head, verbosity was one of them, where you just look at how long the response is. Some people use LM as a judge, where again they either have their own crafted prompts, and they like instruct an LM to reproduce their like how they would look at a response and decide if it's good or not. Something, for example, we worked at Quotient is developing those LM as a judge prompts programmatically in a way that's aligned with human labels that were provided, such that by the end of the process, you have an LM judge that's actually like very that's crafted in order to be correlated with the manual labels that you've provided to your LM outputs. So that's kind of like a way to say, hey, you've labeled 10, 20 outputs from an LM as good or bad. You can use the system to have an LM judge. You can then apply to 100, 1,000, 10,000 outputs and be as confident as you can be that it's going to be representative and correlated with your own judgment of those outputs.
Got it. Okay, so still definitely, like, I'm still hearing that main theme of, like, human in the loop no matter what approach it is, because
Yes.
LMs need to learn from human behavior when it comes to evaluating and often still creating your own evaluation data set, at least as a starting point to really show what areas you care about.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the kind of like things that you can do to address this problem that people rightfully bring up in terms of, hey, like why would I trust that LM evaluating another LM? And there are different reasons you should do that. Like sometimes you have like an instruction to an LM that you can use to do evaluation, or sometimes you use like a bigger model to test smaller models. But another reason is actually if you can develop a system where you start providing like a nugget of human feedback and human data, that will work a lot better than something out of the box. And actually, I think there's this general theme that I see across the field where if you can like inject a little bit of human feedback or human data, especially if you can do it a little bit iteratively, where you give the model a chance to learn and update, and then you provide a bit more feedback, that can go a really long way.
I'm glad that Databricks has a product that can do that, Denny. But product pitch aside, I really love how deep we're going into like how do you actually productionize this. Like I know we've gone through a few of them now. We still have comprehensive and reproducible left.
Yes,
Uh,
comprehensive was the coverage discussion that we had. Like, you need to make sure you test enough.
mhm.
We can go back to the being surprised argument. Uh, Comprehensive, and what was the last one? Remind me.
Reproducible.
Reproducible. Oh, yes. Yeah, you basically need to like be able, like, similar to like, I know, good experimental practices. If you run the test again, you need to like know where, be able to like correlate with numbers you've gotten before. You need to know where the metrics come from. You need to be able to audit it, and ideally you can like hand off that process to someone else, and they can rerun it and get similar results. If it's something like too black boxy, or like you can't share it with other people, or you yourself audited, then you're gonna have trouble later on, because again, you also won't know what to change, or like what the numbers mean, or sometimes you'll get unexpected performance metrics or quality metrics that you won't be able to interpret.
I like how you said similar results. Not the same results, but similar results.
Yes, it's all non-deterministic land, so it can only be statistically equivalent.
Cool. So one of the things I'm curious about through all of this, like, I'm just curious, like, what spotted you to create Quotient AI in that case? Like, what's the drawing factor? Because you did some, just like you said, did some amazing things with GitHub Copilot, but then you're like, going, "Yow, you're 2 years ahead." So that's what I'm guessing spotted you to say, like, "Hey, we can do something even cooler," but being startup mode again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was very much motivated by the belief that we could help other people who are building in the space. Like, I am very much of the opinion that especially today, anyone can build with this technology and build amazing things. And it should not be blocked by accessibility to tooling or knowledge. So what we want to do with Quotient is like use our expertise, and also like, I know, peer reviewed papers, and like do the upfront work and build that into a product that allows everyone to be able to build really, really good cutting edge AI products without necessarily having to be part of like a big enterprise like GitHub and Microsoft. And that's my hope. And I think with technology you can definitely do that, and that's our goal with Quotient.
Cool, but then one thing which you alluded to, but so you're building the technologies that are going to be super helpful. So people, all walks of life, it's easier for them to build these AI products, right?
Yeah.
But then there's still the processes that are missing. So what are the things that like you feel that you are doing, or we as a general AI community need to do better when it comes to building these processes? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about you need to evaluate, you need to build infrastructure right up front, but I'm just curious because obviously you're working with customers and you're building this. So you're day in, day out, you're seeing this happen. I'm just curious if there's any underlying themes that you've seen here.
Yeah, I think the people I see more to be most successful, I have maybe like tempered expectations. Like, they're like, yeah, I know, again, going back to where we started this conversation, I know that this won't work magically out of the box, and I know that I need to spend time getting it to work and getting it better. A lot of people dive very deep into the data they have, if they have their own customers, or the data their customers have. Like, we work with engineers who are pouring over traces to see like exactly where something went wrong, and they're really thinking deep about, do they have the right data? Is the data wrong? Do we need to update our models? So there's definitely a lot of pragmatism and patience and diligence of the people I see are most successful. So in terms of processes, I'd say, again, like, allow, in a lot of ways, is like allowing yourself a bit of time, like not doubling your like delivery times, but allowing yourself a bit of time to basically like look at the system, look at what you've built, and really understand as much as possible. Again, non-determinism. As much as possible, like how it's working, why, where you could make it better, um, and then that's gonna be key for actually like getting better and better a little bit over time.
So I really like how you use the word tempered expectations because typically I only see people with too high of expectations. Like rarely the expectations are set so low that you then like blow them out of the water. So I really liked how you'd phrase that. Um, and just as a parting piece of advice for all the listeners, just curious, any advice you have on anybody who either is planning to get started with building out their Gen AI applications, like best practices, or if they've already started building them but not quite in production, what should they be doing now that they might not be doing as at the moment?
I would say start with very like basic like a very basic process. Like don't build like a 10-step AI agent because that's just gonna become like a nightmare to debug. Like start with one thing, and when you have a good sense of how that works and how well it's doing, add another step and another step. Like build from ground up iteratively. And then you're like, trust me, you're gonna end up with a better product and faster than having built the entire thing at once. It's again similar to software development. Don't write 10,000 lines of code and submit a PR. Like your peers will hate you. Like build incrementally and you'll have a better time, and everyone will end you have a better time. And also I think you'll develop a lot of intuition about how these systems work. Like I actually think that's something that I see, again, the people who do this very well have a really, really good intuition about how to, I don't know, how to do prompt engineering, or how to like, I know, build good RAG systems. Like they have sometimes they can even explain why it works, but like I know if I do this thing, it will do a little bit better. And that's actually fine. But it's intuition developed over time by putting in this initial investment.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today and having such an enlightening conversation on the importance of infrastructure processes and really core focus on evaluation. So thank you again for joining us today, Julia.
It was awesome. Thanks so much for having me here. And yeah, looking forward to talking more about this.